Yo, what is up, you lovely effing specimens? It is your boy Zether here, and yes, I just ripped off Rogue X. But that aside, I do have a quick little self-plug that I need to do before we get into what if Deku was born with Mob's powers. Now, just like I said on what if Naruto had assault mode, I have to plug our new channel. Me, Rogue X, Izukage, and Phoenix What Ifs are going to be making a group channel to overthrow We the Celestials. We do it right, and come on out. Y'all like to see more of us. If you like my content, their content, make sure you go give a subscription over to that other channel, as we are going to be dropping our first video July 1st. But with that being said though, guys, I don't want to waste your guys' time. This intro's been long enough. So let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, so where we basically left off last was All Might and Deku were talking at Dagoma Beach. Now, All Might would proceed to essentially go over to Nezu's office, and he would begin to have a talk with Nezu. See, a lot of you guys in the comment section said Deku should become a villain because it would add more depth to the story, and while I do agree with that, I did put the community tab and asked you guys whether Bakugou should or shouldn't be allowed back into UA. And it's a majority, guys. I don't know. Like, at first coming into the video, I was going to make him a villain, but I just can't do it. I can't bring myself to make Bakugou a villain, knowing that a lot of the more people will probably dislike it if I make him not a villain. So I don't know. Your boy Zether's left with the dilemma of make more people angry and have a lot of people who wanted that happy, or make other people angry and have other people happy. So at this point, majority won, and now I'm just gonna stick with what I said already. I'm just gonna basically go with the notion that Bakugou should be let back into UA, seeing as 2.7k people voted. I feel like it's only right that I give the people who voted for the yes to be allowed to win. So with that being said, yeah, I wasted about a minute of this video just talking about that. I am so sorry, but seriously, All Might would walk into Nezu's office as he would proceed to have a conversation with Nezu. He would ask Nezu, if there's any possibility for Bakugou to be let back in. Maybe they don't even have to let him back into the hero course. Bakugou could be let back into general studies. And if he shows that he is ready to come back, they can maybe let him back in. You'd begin to explain the situation to Nezu and say that Deku himself didn't want Bakugou to get expelled. He may have done that to him, but ultimately it was the one, like, Deku was the one who had that happen to him. It wasn't Nezu who got tortured in the way that Deku did. And if Deku's willing to forgive him, why should Nezu feel any different? Nezu would tell All Might that he understands his sentiments and that he knows that he's coming from this because, well, that is one of his students along with Muriel, but he doesn't know if he can just let somebody back in who shows signs of villainy. To which All Might would step in and say, well, what if we don't, well, what happens if we don't raise this kid right? What happens if we don't give him the chance to, be shown the light? We wouldn't be a great hero school after all if we weren't able to guide our students to the right path. As Nezu would begin to think about this, he would then tell All Might that he's right and that they're going to be letting Bakugou back into the hero course as the normal UA courses. As literally, it's at this moment that Bakugou would basically just be walking around in his walking around town, as he's basically taking one of the wrong turns in an alleyway, right? Bakugou would basically just be looking around for areas, as at this point he gave up on being a hero. Bakugou would basically just be wandering as he would see some guy with black hair, plenty of scars, and blue eyes. As he would look towards his direction, he would basically walk over to him, and Dabi, yes, Dabi would be committing a couple of crimes all on his own. As he would proceed to essentially talk to Bakugou, Bakugou would basically just get to know Dabi a little bit, and he would smile as Dabi would tell him what he's been, planning and all the things he's been up to. Bakugou would proceed to look at Dabi as he would say, all that, over these small little things. These low-life crooks weren't even worth killing. As Dabi would basically say that they were annoying, so they got what they deserved. And Bakugou would say that he knows a thing or two about annoying pests. as he'd proceed to talk a little bit to Dabi. And after a while, he would end up basically telling Dabi that, he seems like a cool guy. Maybe they can stay in contact or something. Maybe Bakugou would join along. As Dabi would tell Bakugou that maybe, but, he doesn't even know if some kid is strong enough. As Bakugou would show off his explosions and lunge at Dabi, as Dabi would realize that Bakugou is actually the real deal. He's pretty powerful in his own right. Dabi would tell Bakugou that with a little bit of training, he might just be strong enough. And Bakugou would proceed to basically go home that same day. He would look at his emails as he would get something from Principal Nezu, and he would be told that he's going to be let back into UA in the general course, and that if he can prove himself to be worthy of going back to the hero course, they will allow him to go back, but for that, he needs to prove himself. Bakugou, as soon as he sees that, he would think that this is his chance. He can still become a hero, as he would proceed to basically accept immediately, even though he just did a couple of things, a couple of shady things. He would still accept and keep Dabi's number in the back burner. He would never meet Dabi that day that he was promised, and he would go to UA and see Deku, as Deku was, pretty much just walking by after everything had happened, and it had been a couple of days. Now on this day, it would be the day of the USJ, as Deku would basically be proceeding to just be walking around with Uraraka, as they would both be talking to each other about some things. Bakugou would walk up to Deku and he would thank him for talking to All Might, and All Might talking to Nezu, as Deku would say that it was no problem and that it was his fault partially for never showing off his powers. If only he would have shown them, then maybe Bakugou wouldn't have had all of this happen to him. And at this point, Deku would proceed to essentially just look at Bakugou, as he would basically tell him that he's glad he came back to his senses, as he'd basically walk on the bus, and this is when they would all go to the USJ, as everything would basically play out as you would expect it to. Everybody would go onto the bus and they would have their normal conversations, with Bakugou being out of the picture. And this is when they would basically arrive to the USJ. All the students would get out of their buses respectively, and they would proceed to essentially just walk over to the areas that they're gonna be working at. As they would get down, Deku, I almost said Naruto, but Deku would proceed to essentially get off the bus, as immediately he just senses so much malicious intent coming off from the USJ building. As immediately Deku just goes up to Aizawa and tells him that he feels some bad presences inside there. Aizawa would immediately push that thought out of his mind, and he would proceed to basically just tell Deku that, he shouldn't worry too much about it, that maybe it's not a big deal. To which Deku would basically just say that to tell Aizawa to be on guard and to not close the door behind them. As Aizawa would basically look towards Deku, and he would just be thinking that, what does this kid know? There was nobody in there. 13's in there right now. They should be fine. They'd walk inside. 13 would give her speech, and Kurogiri would arrive. To which immediately he would proceed to shoot his warp gate straight at the students. But as soon as he does, Deku would point his hand out at Kurogiri and suck him away. He would teleport him elsewhere, as Kurogiri would arrive at, literally in Antarctica. As he would be looking around, he'd be wondering what happened. Kurogiri would be down below with Nomu, as he would say, "Nomu, attack that brat," as the Nomu would immediately blitz towards Deku and shatter his ribs from the left side. As Deku didn't see it coming, Deku would be flung into a wall, and this is when Aizawa and 13 would jump into action. As Aizawa would disable the Nomu's quirks, 13 would use her black hole quirk to essentially warp the Nomu away, as this would actually end up causing Aizawa to get mangled even worse than he was in canon. See, what happened was 13 would basically just be warping away Aizawa and the Nomu, because, her gates aren't exactly the most efficient, perfect things in the world. She would have actually ended up warping away one oh my god. She would have essentially... Okay, I need to explain this a little better. I am doing this awfully. I'm sorry, boys. Your boy a little tired. I just got back from Cali, and all those pre-recorded videos just have me on edge. Okay, as I was saying, I need to explain this a little better. See, as soon as the Nomu rushed at Deku and punched him away, 13 and Aizawa would have immediately sprung into action. Aizawa would activate his erasure quirk, and the Nomu's rest of the abilities, such as regeneration and all that stuff, would have gone away. The Nomu strength in it of itself would remain the same though, and it would have started to essentially punch Aizawa, as it would have literally shattered Aizawa's left jaw, and it would have just started smashing Aizawa into the concrete as it would begin to break and mangle some of Aizawa's bones. 13 would stand behind the Nomu as she would begin to warp the Nomu away, but as she warped the Nomu away, the Nomu almost took Aizawa with him, and Aizawa had to use every last fiber of his being to not be taken by it, which would have actually caused Deku to barely be able to, move his hand and move it towards Aizawa's direction, as he would barely have it so that Aizawa wasn't pulled away with the black hole. The Nomu would be taken away and Aizawa would be laying there on the ground unconscious, as all of the villains would proceed to essentially swarm into the direction of the hero students, as 13 would have immediately told the students to break down that door and leave now, that she's going to stay behind and hold them off for as long as she can, but she cannot have any students getting hurt. They need to run as fast as they can and call for backup immediately, as it's after this that Kurogiri is gone. If the villains don't get this now, they'll never get that chance, and All Might's not even around, so Shigaraki has no real escape from this situation. This is when out of nowhere a black portal would emerge, as this would be one All for One himself. He would teleport Shigaraki out of there before anything can happen, and the rest of the small fry villain would be handled by all of the hero students who wanted to help 13 out. So the students would essentially take out as many villains as they can, but they would start getting overwhelmed due to the amount of villains that they were having to face. I mean, even though some of these students were powerful, they're not that strong in their own right, and against this many villains, they just simply couldn't do it. Todoroki was doing the best that he can, but without Bakugou, there was no way they were gonna beat these guys without suffering major injuries. So a lot of the students would have actually ended up getting hurt way worse, and Deku would have actually had to sit there and watch it with tears in his eyes, screaming "No!" as his fellow classmates were just getting absolutely destroyed. And as this was happening, Deku's meter would have immediately skyrocketed to 100, as he would immediately blitz in front of the villains, his eyes just clear white, and the shot would be that of Mob whenever he goes to his Mob Psycho 100 mode, as he would proceed to destroy each and every single one of the villains respectively. He would destroy them all and warp them all into prisons, as they would all be taken away. Deku would then proceed to fall out of that state, and he would fall out into unconsciousness, as Recovery Girl would come in, and she would have her work cut out for her. They would start doing, healing on the rest of the students and such, and Deku would be in a pretty bad condition. As when Deku's in the hospital, his mother Inko would of course come in to check up on him, and she would ask Deku how all of this happened. He should have been strong enough to avoid all of this. Deku would look at his mom, as he would say that he didn't know if that was the right situation to use his powers. He didn't know. As Inka would look at her son, she would immediately go down onto her knees as she would begin to sob and say that she doesn't want to see him like this. She would begin to explain to Deku that that's not what she meant. She doesn't mean hide away your powers and don't show your gifts. What she means is don't sit there and flash it off in the way that Bakugou would do it. She didn't want Deku to turn out in the way that Bakugou did, and that's why she told him what she did. Deku would immediately understand what his mother means, and this is when Deku would immediately aim his hand at himself as he would begin to heal himself. Deku would then proceed to essentially stand up and go to the rest of his classmates as he would say, "I understand." Immediately, this is when Deku would proceed to essentially open a portal to the location of All for One. Oh wait, no, Mob can't do that because, Mob's not that broken. He can't do that ability with the people who kidnapped his brother. I doubt Deku can do that with Shigaraki. So retcon that part. I was making this man Deku way too OP for a second. But no, seriously, Deku would proceed to unravel all of his bandages and look at his classmates as he would tell them all that they need to start training to be ready for the next time. As they would all go to Dagoma Beach as well as Bakugou, he would invite Bakugou and they would all start training, to which Bakugou would show signs of being different. Bakugou would also go to Nezu's office as he would tell Nezu what he had done during that time that he was in the hero school. That he actually met a villain by the name of Dabi, and maybe, just maybe, they can use that to their advantage to find the location to the League of Villains. Maybe there's some correlation between the League and Dabi. So Bakugou would try to hit up Dabi a couple of times, and he would meet Dabi a couple days later. To which Bakugou would tell Dabi that he's sorry he couldn't meet him that day. He was busy with other things. As Dabi would say, yeah, all right. They would have a little bit of a conversation. And Bakugou would basically bring up the League of Villains that attacked UA. And he would say that those guys definitely were very uncoordinated. As Dabi would say that he can say that again. If he would have done that, there's no way he would have been taken down that easily. As those small fry. And Bakugou would say that that's damn straight. As they'd basically both look at each other and they'd both in tandem just agree that they both could have done way better jobs in terms of organizing that attack. Bakugou would talk to him as if, he was still down bad. And yes, I just said down bad. And they would proceed to essentially just go through with, talking to each other and pretty much just giving each other the run around and with what they've been up to. As it's at this point that Deku and the rest of the gang is pretty much training during the 2-week training arc that they have. During this time, that would all basically go by and they would all return back to class, to which they would all essentially get suited up and they would all get ready in their UA attires. As they would all basically just put on their little outfits, they would go to class, and this is when they would all basically just be swarmed by people from class 1B and the general course who want to, look at class 1A and what they're like. As, Monoma would do his thing, Deku wouldn't really say a thing, and since there's no Bakugou, they wouldn't ever say, you guys are all extra. So yeah, there'd be none of that stuff happening. Instead, Bakugou would be amongst the crowd standing in their way, and he would nod his head towards Deku, to which Deku would understand and he would nod it back. As he would walk away with Uraraka and Ida, and it's at this point that they would all be getting ready to go to the UA Sports Festival. They would go there, and this is when Deku would actually be told that he's going to be giving the speech, to which Deku would go to the podium, and immediately, as soon as he stands there, he would just stand there looking shy. He would just say that, as he would just continue doing that until Midnight would say, what he's trying to say is everybody do their best, go plus ultra, as Deku would say, yeah, and everybody would just be like, yeah, that kid's weird. As Deku would just be feeling pretty bad for that horrible performance he just did. Bakugou would, give him palm himself in the face, and he would just say that if it was him up there, he probably would have said something along the lines of he's going to win and that there's no hope for anybody else. As yeah, that's definitely something Bakugou would have done, but it's not Bakugou, it's Deku. So yeah, that being said, Deku would basically proceed to look at Bakugou as he'd say, yeah, he's right. And this is when the race would start. Immediately, Deku would blitz over to the location of the end of the race. And this is when everybody would basically just be fighting for second place. Deku would just sit down as he would end up creating a pop soda can, and he would get a bag of chips. He would just start eating away, and he'd basically just be sitting as everybody's wondering where that kid is at. And this is when some people in the crowd would basically say, look, he's there, he already won, and he's eating snacks. As what's it called, our boy, what's his name, President Mike, our boy President Mike would be like, incredible, Izuku Midoriya, first place, he gets a total of 10 million points. And this is when everybody would realize that Deku was gone. They'd realize how strong he was, and Todoroki would immediately just be thinking that he's going to have to bring his A game if he's going to want to beat this kid. As Deku would just be standing in the front of everything, everybody would be wondering what's going on. And next, we're going to jump into the cavalry battle, to which the teams are actually going to be as they were in canon. Deku, Uraraka, this time he would actually be with Ida, so no Tokiyami, and Mei. Now, actually, yeah, let's say Tokiyami, since Mei Hatsume doesn't necessarily have to be on the team. So yeah, Tokiyami. As soon as everything starts, Deku would basically just create a telekinetic force field in front of them, preventing anybody from harming them. That includes Todoroki. So in terms of that would pretty much just be a moot point. There'd be no real reason to cover that. So now we're going to jump on into the next battles, which is Deku versus Shinso. Immediately, as soon as the battle would start, Shinso would yell something out to Deku, as Deku would immediately just know that he should not say an absolute word to Shinso. He would rush towards Shinso's direction, and Shinso would continue to yell stuff at Deku. And Deku would immediately just break. He would say, "You can't talk like that about my friend." as he would be under mind control, and immediately before anything can happen or Shinso can say walk off, Deku would snap right out of it, as Deku would say that that's a pretty handy technique. Deku would look towards Shinso as he would say walk away, as Shinso would immediately turn around and walk off the stage. Deku would then go into the changing room, or waiting room, I guess you could say, as he'd begin waiting for the next battles, or the next match, I guess you could say. As he'd basically just be sitting there with Uraraka as he tells her to do her best. And she would actually be facing against, who should she be facing up? She will be fighting, I don't know, whoever Uraraka fights, she's basically going to lose against, because everybody who made it this far can essentially whoop Uraraka, so there's really no real point to cover this. So yeah, Uraraka still loses and she's still sad. Ida's brother still unfortunately gets mangled by the hero killer, and everything basically goes as it does in canon. Shoto would still challenge Deku, and Bakugou wouldn't even be around to be allowed into the general studies or the UA stuff, seeing as general studies kids just weren't allowed. So yeah, or no, actually Bakugou definitely would be there. So Todoroki would challenge Bakugou, and Bakugou, yeah, I'm thinking Bakugou should definitely be allowed, since if Mei Hatsume could get in from the general course, then I think Bakugou could definitely do it as well with the training he's been doing with Deku. Yeah, Bakugou's definitely still in the race for contending in what's going to happen. So yeah, that being said, Deku would proceed to essentially look at Todoroki as Todoroki declares war on Deku. Deku would look at Todoroki as he would tell him that, you know, he's going to win that battle, and that, you know, Todoroki's not going to be able to do a thing about it. Todoroki would look at Deku as he would say, we'll see about that. And he would walk off, as Bakugou would be standing in the doorway saying, don't write me off yet, half and half, as he'd basically walk off and say, whatever, reject. Bakugou would crunch up his fist, and Deku would just hold his hand out as he shakes his head no, and Bakugou would understand this gesture. After this, Deku would basically just be told by Bakugou to wipe the floor with that kid, and Deku would nod his head as he would stand outside, and immediately, as soon as the battle starts, Todoroki would shoot ice at Deku, to which Deku would immediately wave his hand as the ice would melt down into water, and Todoroki would be shocked at what just happened, as Deku would immediately say walk off. Todoroki would immediately just be, you know, taken over subconsciously, and he would walk off the stage. As Deku immediately would take off the mind control, Todoroki would get enraged by the fact that Deku did that, and he would shoot a blast of fire right at Deku, to which Deku uses his telekinetic abilities to shoot it back at Todoroki, which would burn him and send him straight to Recovery Girl. After that, we are now going to be covering Deku versus Bakugou. But if you guys want to see how that battle plays out, make sure to tune in for the next part of What If Deku Was Born with Mob's Powers, seeing as I am going to be covering the rest of the UA Sports Festival, the Stain arc, the finals, and getting into a little bit of the Forest Training arc. So with that being said though, guys, it has been your boy Zether. Remember to go check out the group channel, link in the description. Leave a like, make sure to hit that subscribe button as I'm getting close to 13K, and I would appreciate it if you helped your boy out. So if you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. But with that being said though, guys, it has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace. I hope you guys enjoyed the, what I did with Bakugou. But yeah, that being said, it's been your boy Zether, out. Peace. Bye.